Hello, everyone. I'm here. I'll start the demo now. Today, I'm going to show you how to make blueberry and lavender eclair. So we have a few parts to make for this recipe. We have our choux pastry for the eclair. We have lavender blueberry jam, and as well as we have chantilly for the topping. But also, I'm going to do some chocolate feathers for decoration. So I'll start with those first. So here I have some tempered white chocolate. Okay. So this is couverture white chocolate. It's already been tempered. So to make our feather, we'll need something that we can curve the feather on. I don't know what this is for, but I bought it from IKEA. But you can use the inside of parchment paper or a tissue tube or the kitchen towel, the tube. You can use that as well. So we'll also need some small pieces of parchment paper. You can focus here as I'm going to do here. Okay. And we'll need a paring knife that has a sharp point. So to make our feather, we're going to take the paring knife and we're going to dip it in the chocolate like so, with the chocolate on one side. Then we're going to come and we're just going to press down gently, lifting up the knife and pulling back. So basically, we're using the tip of the knife like a stamp. So you press gently and then pull back. Now, if your chocolate begins to set, you won't be able to curve it. So you want to work a little bit quickly. If you see your chocolate starting to set, you stop on that sheet, put it to fold already, and then you can start a new one. Sorry if my fingers are in the way. I can do one on the table after, but I need to hold down the paper so it doesn't lift up. But after I finish this, I'll do one on the table without my fingers, and then you'll be able to see a little bit better maybe. So, okay, so you see, I get the chocolate. There'll be some chocolate on the other side. Clean that side off, okay? We don't want a lot of chocolate, but we need enough so when we lift it up, we'll have some extra chocolate to create the line down the center of the feather. I'll do one more. Okay. So next you'll do is take something that's curved and then place the feathers inside. So when they set, they'll have a nice little curve. Again, if you don't have like this one, the inside roll of your parchment paper or whatnot, you can see we save these a lot. And we can actually put the paper inside there also and it'll give a curve. Or like your kitchen towel tube, anything that has a curve you can use. So I'm going to put these into the refrigerator to let them set, and then we'll start doing our recipe. So next we'll start with our blueberry. So for our blueberry and lavender jam, we have blueberry puree. Inside the blueberry puree, I put the lavender already. To do this, because I want to prepare beforehand the demo, you heat up the blueberry puree just a little bit, and then put in your lavender and let it sit for about 1 hour. This is going to infuse the lavender flavor inside. We have our NH pectin. We have a large portion of sugar, which will cook with the jam. We have a small portion of sugar that will mix with our pectin. And then we have our glucose. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to strain out my lavender from the blueberry puree, because we don't want to eat the chunks of lavender inside. We just want to infuse it like tea. So like I said, I just warmed up this puree slightly, not boiling or anything. Just warm it up a little bit, dump in the lavender, and just let it sit. I did this 1 hour ago. Yes.
Are we using lavender powder here?
No, you'll see it's the full dry lavender. I'll show you. You can see the kind of chunks. You buy in a jar, like they sell like the herbal teas and things. It's the lavender flower, the whole dry lavender flower.
Chef, can we use blueberry compote instead of puree, which is available in the market?
Compote's already cooked, like jam in the jar. That's already finished jam. If you want to use fresh blueberries for this, it's going to be expensive, or frozen blueberries, you can do as well. You don't have to use the puree.
Yeah, because some of them, they say that they have a blueberry compote and lavender essence.
You can use lavender essence, but I don't know how much to use because every essence has different kind of strengths. Some are higher quality, some are just really perfumey and artificial. You can try lavender essence. Definitely don't use 15 grams. You'll have to adjust that one. And for me, when someone says compote, that's already cooked jam. If you're going to do that, then maybe you can buy the already cooked jam and put a couple drops of essence inside and mix it, and then you're okay.
Is fresh lavender a good option?
Yeah, sure. Fresh lavender you can use. Like if you're growing lavender, like I grow lavender in my garden when the time is okay and it doesn't always flower. But yeah, you can use fresh lavender if you have it around. Sure, why not? But I have a very small plant, so getting 15 grams of fresh lavender would kill my whole plant. So now that we strained it out, it should have a nice lavender smell to it, but don't make too strong. We don't want to feel like we're eating perfume. Okay, so if you're gonna infuse it longer, reduce the amount of lavender. Like I said, it's a very short infusion, so I'm using quite a bit of lavender inside. But if you didn't want to do now, leave it overnight. Maybe use only like 3 or 5 grams of lavender inside. You can adjust the steeping to your like. It's just like tea. You're steeping tea basically. So the stronger you like, you can steep it longer or use more. Or if you don't like it as strong, you can use less. So now I'm going to put the blueberry puree into the pot and we can begin cooking our jam. That lavender I'm going to throw out. I don't need any more. It's done its purpose. We're going to take the large portion of sugar and put it into the pot. We're going to take our glucose and put it into the pot. If you don't have glucose, light clear corn syrup will be fine. In the United States, we tend to use corn syrup much more than glucose. Glucose is also going to be fine. So either way you can use. Okay, so now we're going to put it onto a pot and we're going to begin cooking. Can you check my plug? Okay, thank you, Vincent. All right, so now we're going to bring this up to a boil. Yes, question, Ken. Yes, I need a favor. Sorry, inside my bakery chiller, left side, bottom, there's a lemon. Can you bring me a lemon?
So because some ask about the blueberry compote, right? So basically because they have blueberry compote, so they will keep the step and then just add on the lavender.
Yeah. If it's already cooked blueberry jam, I mean, if you want to buy anything already cooked, there's no problem with that. Like I said, you can actually replace this with frozen blueberries if you want more chunky. You can use fresh blueberries, but they're expensive. And if you want to buy the jam already made and just add a little bit of essence to it, sure, you can do that also. It's no problem. Sometimes it's easier just to buy things already made.
Can we use blueberry filling instead of fresh blueberry puree?
Blueberry fillings are already cooked also. So again, you're not gonna, if you're buying an already cooked filling, do not do this whole step with pectin, sugar, and cooking. You can add some lavender essence to the cooked filling, or you can just use the filling by itself. You can't really steep these with a dry lavender in the cooked filling because they're already cooked with pectin and all that. So if you want to just buy, go ahead and buy. It's okay. But then you'll have to use like a liquid essence because you can't steep that. Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. So we're going to let this come up to a boil. And here I have the sugar mixed to pectin. We always mix sugar with a little pectin. So when we sprinkle it in, the pectin just doesn't lump up right away. It kind of breaks up the pectin and distributes it to the sugar. So it's easier to dissolve inside. So we're going to add in slowly and whisk. Now we're going to boil this for about a minute. You're going to want to cook this to around 104 degrees, but I'll show you how to check by eye if you don't have a thermometer.
The glucose that you're talking about, is it the regular glucose that we find in India, like glucose tea, or is it a different one? No,
it's glucose syrup. It's sold as liquid glucose or glucose syrup. I can't recommend specific brands and things in India. I've been to India many times and I've taught there for quite a few times. I know that, I mean, I always get whatever I need. Even if I need like the French flour, they find for me, no problem. So I know you can find it, but specific brands, I'm not 100% sure because, like I said, somebody purchased this for me and I just teach the class when I go. Yes, you can thicken with cornstarch, but it's not going to be the same. Cornstarch is a thickening agent. So in theory, it should thicken, but I haven't made jam using cornstarch, so I can't tell you how much to use. If you want to look at it similar, like cooking a pastry cream, maybe you can use. So in theory, it should work, but it's not the same kind of setting like pectin does. That'll become thick like a cream. Pectin's going to set it like a jam. If you don't have NH pectin, for this, you can use yellow pectin also. Just go to the store, say pectin. I mean, if you find a pastry store, every pastry store should sell pectin, even if it's not NH pectin. Okay, so you'll see it starting to thicken up. Can you give me a little closer here? So if we want to check by eye, right here. You see, I put some drop on the table, and you see it holds the shape. It doesn't run down like liquid. That's how we know the jam is going to be done. And if you take your finger and you should be able to pull it, and it forms kind of like stringing like this. Okay, you see? That's how you can check your jam is done just by eye. But if you're not sure, you cook it to 104 degrees using a probe thermometer. So now we're going to add in our lemon juice. Now the thing is, lemon juice, when you're making jam, always go at the end. If you cook in the lemon juice and cook it for a long time, it's going to start to invert the sugar and your jam won't set. Okay? If it's pectin, then yes. I know I know a few of the E numbers off the top of my head when I'm working with the vegan stuff. I don't know all of them, but pectin, you have two types. You have yellow pectin and you have NH pectin. NH pectin, you can heat it up and it's gonna reverse. Yellow pectin, you cannot, but you can make jam with any pectin. Okay. So we're just going to transfer this to a bowl to allow it to cool down. And then we'll start making our choux pastry. 1 second. Okay, so put this into the refrigerator. Yes. Okay, so next we'll start making the choux pastry for the eclair. This choux pastry, very versatile, can make eclair, can make the chouquette. In our basic cheesecake and choux, you'll see we have raspberry religious. It's also the same choux pastry. It's even the same recipe. So to begin making our choux pastry, we're going to put our water, our milk, our sugar and salt, and our butter into a pot. And then we're going to bring this up to a boil. No, I don't have an eggless recipe for choux. Choux pastry is, you know, there's just some things that, you know, you just don't kind of touch, and choux pastry is one of them. Not saying that I haven't been trying to work out a nice vegan choux. I haven't got it quite where I'm super happy it's the same yet, but choux pastry really revolve around eggs. Without the egg in the choux pastry, it won't puff up and become hollow. The egg is basically the leavening agent that's inside the choux pastry. No, rose flour is low gluten flour. You can use, for this, you can use cake flour or all-purpose flour.
Any specific percentage? I mean the fat percentage?
No. Vincent, what's the fat percentage on our anchor? No, not really.
So the boiling is between 80 to 90 degrees?
I don't put a thermometer in, but yes, it should be because you water boils to 90. So just boil. You can see your eyes bubble, bubble, bubble. That means boil. Basically, even I don't have to bring this up to in a whole boil also. I need to melt the butter first.
Yeah, can we have a gluten-free recipe?
Cannot. I don't have one. I'm sure if you search online, maybe you can find egg-free or gluten-free choux pastry, but I can't give you something that I don't have. And I will never give you guys any recipe that I haven't done and tested. You see a lot of times, if I reply you on a Facebook or in the group, I say you can try, but I haven't tested. It's because I tell you like this. I'm not going to tell you something that I don't know and lead you the wrong way. So, hold on. So now we're going to add in the flour and we're going to make a roux. So we're going to put the flour in and then we're going to heat up on a low heat. And we're going to want to stir really well. And we're going to cook this till it comes together. Okay. So it shouldn't stick to the pot when the roux is cooked enough. And when you look at the bottom of the pot, there should be a little skin on the bottom of the pot. Okay. So now you got to come to the kitchen. After I put in the KitchenAid, put in the egg, you can ask me that question that's pending.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna add our roux into the bowl of a KitchenAid. And we're gonna begin beating. You'll see a lot of steam come out. Okay. We're trying to cool off the roux so it doesn't cook the egg. We don't wait till it's completely cool, but once it like stops steaming, then we'll be able to add in our eggs. Right, now you can ask me that question now. What was it?
Okay. When I bake eclair, I never cut that close. When I saw it under bake, because the color was not dark, I continued to bake, but end up that eclair shrink.
Eclairs they're difficult, huh? It's one of the more harder things to make in pastry. It falls under the category like macaroons. When you first start, they're very difficult. But then once you get it, if you follow that same procedure every single time, the thing about the choux pastry is you got to bake them without a fan. And you have to bake them at around 160 degrees or so. Around 160 degrees. And they're going to take about an hour to an hour and a half to bake.
Usually eclairs sink after they are cooled down. Please tell me where I'm going wrong.
They're not baked long enough. They have to have the color. When we bake the choux pastry, open the door to let the steam out until we have a nice color. That means the crust is already set. Once the color is nice and brown, only then your eclair be ready. If the eclair has not formed a nice tight outside because the inside is hollow, when they come out, they're going to shrink. If they're shrink, they're not baked well enough. So now we'll start slowly adding in the egg, little at a time, to incorporate.
Is roast flour same as cake flour plus a little bit of corn flour?
No, guys, flour does not make flour weaker. Please get this out of your mind. Okay, this is a cheap trick that doesn't work. Low gluten flour grown in a specific season. So adding corn flour does not work because corn flour, one, does not absorb the same amount of water that flour does. It's going to change the water absorption. By adding corn flour, it's basically just taking flour out of the recipe and doing something that absorbs more water and actually gums up that flour doesn't. It's completely different. Please don't have this in your mind. I can add corn flour to bread flour, make cake flour. It does not work. It's not the same. This is false. I'm not criticizing who asked that because I've seen this a lot. It doesn't work. It's not. Low gluten flour is made from a specific type of wheat that has low gluten inside.
Can we use almond milk in the making of cottage?
I believe it should work. Like I said, I haven't confirmed my vegan recipe yet, but yes. But the egg is the hardest thing to replace. But if you're going to use egg, I figure use milk anyway. Okay.
How should be the inner texture of a macaroon?
Chewy. When you bake macaroons first, they're going to feel a little bit crispy and dry. But always we fill the macaroons before serving. We fill them and put them into the refrigerator overnight or freeze them. So when they come out and they thaw, the filling is going to make the macaroon chewy. A macaroon should be chewy with the filling inside. When you bake it, it's going to be crispy, but after filling it and leaving it in the freezer and thawing out or putting it in the refrigerator overnight, they should be soft and chewy, a macaroon. Okay, hold on a second. So we're gonna make sure everything is well mixed. Okay, can you zoom out a little bit? So to check the texture of our choux pastry, we can pick up the the paddle, and let some drop off, and it should make a V shape. If your if your eclair is too liquid, it means either you scaled the eggs improperly, you scaled something improperly, or you didn't cook the choux long enough, or the roux long enough. If your choux pastry is too liquid, there's nothing you can do. You start a new recipe because the flour is cooked inside. The flour is gelatinized. It's important for the choux pastry. I can't add more flour for a choux pastry that's too liquid. But if your choux pastry is too dry and too stiff, that's fine. We can add a little bit of milk. That's okay. But if it's too liquid, you need to start over. If your macaroon is too liquid, when you pipe it, it's not going to hold the shape. If it's too thick or too stiff, when it dries out, okay, you see we get some nice sharp V. This is what we're looking for. But if it's too stiff, when it dries out, it's going to crack very easy. So I'll fill this into a piping bag. You can ask the question in the meantime.
Milk. Sorry, for the choux, I guess.
For the choux, don't use cream, use milk.
Full cream milk.
Oh, full cream milk, yeah, that's what I'm using. I'm not using low fat milk or any kind of special choux pastry milk. It's just normal full cream milk.
We have used 82% butter here. Can you please advise what do you mean by percentage in butter?
The fat content. The fat content comparison to water. So 82% means it's 82% fat content. If you have a bit of a lower fat content, like a cheaper butter, it'll still work for choux pastry, but things like croissants and lamination, that's more important. So we'll begin piping our choux pastry now. So here I have a tray. I'm gonna spray my tray a little bit of oil, not much. Too much, and then it's not gonna stick when I pipe it. Here I'm using a nozzle for making a eclair. We want to use these kind of curved, this little star-looking nozzle here. It's going to create the lines so the choux will expand more nicely. Using a normal round nozzle, you can, but it won't expand as evenly. It's not a special nozzle. Any pastry store online should sell this one. Okay. So we're going to come and we're going to pipe the eclair, stop, and then pull back. Okay. This is probably the second hardest part besides baking, is piping the eclair nicely. I'm trying to show towards the camera, now I'm going crooked. Huh? Okay, come, and then pull back. The first one, you see, it's a little bit flat. I press too close to the tray, okay? I'll do one where I press a little bit too far from the tray, and then you'll see kind of, it becomes too thin, okay? If your choux is not nice, you go to the store, buy a new pair. I'm kidding, bad joke. You can wipe it off and do another one. So we come, and then cut off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. For sourdough bread,
okay. I'll take this question. It's fine. Yes.
Right. I saw the starter for preferment was stiff, almost like dough. If using normal starter,
I know who you are. I saw your question on Facebook. What is normal starter, Luff? There's stiff and liquid starter. There's two kinds. Okay. I'm sorry, but this whole idea of like normal. I mean, come on. I mean, am I normal? Are you normal? Normal is very subjective. There's stiff and liquid starter. Stiff starter just means that you're using a lower hydration. So if I need a stiff starter, the day before you want to make, just feed your sourdough starter less water, 60% water.
Chef, if you want to prepare in bulk portion like 5 to 10 kg for choux, we have to make flour and liquid mixture with hand only, or we have any other alternatives?
I didn't do any. I don't understand. Yes, by hand. Unless you have a machine that can cook and spin at the same time. They do sell these. They're very expensive and usually for industrial cooking, but you make by hand. You make the roux by hand. But I made like 20 kgs of roux before when I used to work in a hot kitchen for sauce. It's not that difficult. You need a big pot and a little bit of muscle. But if you're doing like factory production, then maybe you invest in one of the cooking machines that can cook and heat at the same and spin at the same time. But you see, it's not cooking that long.
Do we need to rest the choux batter overnight in the chiller?
No, but you can. It's a bit easier to pipe when it's stiff. You can rest it. This one also, if you want, you can't pipe single eclairs very well. You can pipe one long straight line, freeze it, and cut. You can freeze these also. I can make a whole bunch and freeze them inside the freezer for like a month and bake later, no problem. You can also make one long line, freeze that line, and then take a measure and cut if you can't get the same size also.
Is air mat or perforated sulfite a better option for baking choux?
No. You can. But sometimes I find when I use the air mat, they stick at the bottom of the air mat and they crack along the bottom side. I don't have enough choux paste here. Okay. Sorry? No, it needs to be the specific star nozzle size. You can use any kind of round nozzle, sure, you can. You can use a round nozzle, but the one that have the line is going to make it expand more nicely. So now I'm gonna spray them a little bit of oil spray. This is gonna create some moisture on the top so the eclairs don't crack. So this is one tip. If they're frozen, for a better taste, we can spread melted butter or clarified butter on. But to brush with butter while they're soft is hard and much faster. We use some oil spray, create some moisture. So when you put them in the oven and bake, they have a less chance of cracking. Next, we're also going to come with a little bit of icing sugar and just a bit of icing sugar. This is also going to help for the expansion of the eclair as well as create a nicer crust. You don't need to go crazy. You see the ones that are already dusted are already dissolved. Just a little bit of icing sugar is fine. So now here's the trick. Okay, for baking these eclairs, I'm going to bake in a deck oven. Okay, because my convection oven, I cannot turn off the fan. So you don't want to bake in a fan first of all. They'll crack because they'll dry too fast while they're expanding. So the idea about eclairs is you want them to be nice shape on the outside, but hollow, at least mostly hollow on the inside. So to achieve this, we're going to bake in the deck oven, or even if you want to do convection oven, you reduce the heat by about 10 degrees, but no fan. You're going to bake at 160 degrees for about an hour, 160 to 170. They're going to puff up. Only when they puff up, and then you start to see the brown color on the outside, not start. They have a nice brown color. Then you open the oven a little bit and then create a gap with like an oven glove. Let the steam out. What it's going to do is make sure that they stop expanding. Because once they're brown, if you have a lot of moisture in the oven, they're going to continue expanding. And because the outside is hard, they're going to crack on the eclair. So you want to, after you see the color on the eclair, the brown color, you open your oven a little bit, just put the glove there and close back to create a little gap. And then it's going to release the steam and you'll bake about another 15 to 20 minutes in a dry oven. And that's going to make the inside collapse, but the outside is already have set and have the brown color. So the whole eclair won't collapse also. So I'm going to put these into the deck oven, and in an hour or so, I have already pre-baked, but in an hour or so, I open the oven, put the glove in, let the steam out, and then continue baking. But only let the steam come out once the color is nice. That means the crust is set. It's not going to collapse on itself. Okay. Okay. So that's most of everything for our choux pastry is done. So we can actually assemble, because like I said, I have some pre-made choux pastry already. So these are my pre-done choux pastry. The choux pastry, after you bake, you can keep inside the freezer. You can keep them frozen. And then before serving, you're going to want to heat them in the oven to dry them out, make them crispy again. After filling an eclair, the shelf life is not that long because they're going to become soggy from the filling. Okay? So generally, the eclairs, you want them a little bit soft, but you don't store them a long time with the filling. You fill before serving, or at least the same day that you're going to serve them. Any questions?
What is the normal size of commercial eclair?
Generally 13 cm is like the average size that we're using for eclair. Okay, so for this particular eclair, I mean, we can fill it from the bottom like a classic eclair, but we're gonna do something a little bit different. So I'm gonna cut off the top of the eclair. Okay. I don't need this. So classically eclair, you would just fill from the bottom, but now eclairs are being presented in a lot of different ways. So one of this is kind of like an open face eclair.
Can we fry the batter directly?
Yeah, then you'll be making churros. Churros is very similar to choux pastry, and then fry it directly. It's a little bit different. I'm from Miami, where churros is like, that's kind of our thing. The batter's a little bit different than a choux pastry, but it's 99% the same. So if you fry it directly or even freeze it and fry it, then you'll have churro.
Okay. When we freeze, how do we bake? Like, do we need to thaw or bake frozen? And what's the temperature?
Thaw it a little bit, and then 170, maybe about 10 minutes or so. You're gonna have to check. You don't want to burn them, but you want them to be crispy again.
Chef, can we use oil to brush because we don't have oil spray?
Yeah, you can use oil to brush, and actually more better is to use ghee or clarified butter to brush. The flavor is better. But the reason why I use the oil spray is because I'm not frozen. If you want to brush them, I suggest freezing the choux pastry first and then brushing, and you can actually bake frozen. And it'll just take a little bit longer to bake. But yeah, the reason I'm not brushing is because they're very soft. I did directly after piping. If I brush, it's gonna mess up the eclair. But if you freeze them, you can do a little bit of clarified butter or ghee, or even just the oil is fine. Oil is just cheaper, but butter tastes better. No, tiramisu is ladyfingers. It's different. Tiramisu is a ladyfinger sponge. It's not a, I mean, you can. I mean, there's no one stopping you making like a new version of tiramisu using eclair. But if it's not what you're thinking it is. You're thinking of the ladyfinger sponge. Oh, I broke one.
How many pieces does this recipe do?
About 16 to 20. It depends on your pipe, like 8 eclairs because they're making gigantic monster size eclair. But the one I'm making the size, you should get about 18 to 20 eclairs. It depends on how much you left inside the bowl and everything. Okay, so now that I cut in half, I'll get my jam and soften it so we can fill with our jam. You want to ask some questions?
Yeah. Can we rise the temperature for quick baking?
No. I told you, like macaroons and eclairs, they're very specific. There is the difference between pastry and cooking is cooking. Believe me, I know. I did culinary before I was a pastry chef for a brief while. Cooking, you can heat it up faster or do whatever. Pastry, if I tell you to do something, you need to do just like that. Okay, pastry is very exact kind of science. So there's no kind of just a little bit of this and a little bit of that when it comes to making pastry. So no. You bake higher temperature, they're gonna crack and they won't be hollow on the inside, and you're not going to have a nice choux pastry. Sorry?
Can you please the starnozzle? The size of the starnozzle, I mean the number that can be used to make commercial eclairs.
Thank you, Vincent. I'm glad you're doing this one. I don't know, you're the one who buy it. Okay, so this is actually the same jam I made earlier. Okay, the same exact one. So I'm just gonna soften it a little bit with a spoon, just to make it a little bit more pipeable so I can pipe inside. Because it's very short, it's very easy for me to soften because we just made this jam. But if you left it for a little bit longer, you might have to use a KitchenAid and a paddle to do the softening. Don't soften too much. We don't want it to be liquid. We still want it to be thick. So now we're going to take our jam and cut a small hole and then just fill this center part with our blueberry and lavender jam. Okay, so now that this is ready, I'm just going to put this in the refrigerator a little bit just to make sure the jam is a little bit firm on the top. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'll start making my chantilly cream to go on top. So to begin making our chantilly, we have our whipping cream, vanilla extract, and sugar. Now the sugar really up to you. Too much sugar and it won't whip up nicely. But if you like a little bit more sweet or less sweet, you can add or reduce the amount of sugar that you have inside also. In the recipe, I give you 1 vanilla pod. If you want to use vanilla pod, you can. I'm not going to put vanilla pod in here, but if you were going to put, you scrape and put inside. The reason I'm not putting is, to be honest with you, vanilla pod's very expensive. And no one's going to eat my eclair, maybe the Miss Aza or somebody around, but I'm only making 5, so I'm just holding off the vanilla pod. Okay. But if you want, you scrape the vanilla pod and put inside. But if you don't want, the vanilla essence also going to give us a nice flavor. The vanilla pod just to have little specks that look kind of pretty.
Yes, it's like the vanilla pod is Madagascar, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tahitian, Madagascar, you know, Indonesia makes some really good vanilla. Okay, I like to use the Indonesian vanilla, honestly, because it has quite of a different taste and it's cheaper also. So the Indonesian vanilla is also really good.
Is this unsweetened?
Yes. If you have like sweetened non-dairy cream, something like this one, then you don't need to add anything. You just whip it up. Okay. So we'll just whip this up to a firm peak. Sure, but if you do, you have to do overnight. You have to do it at a cold infusion. Or if you heat it up, you have to let it sit in the refrigerator overnight. You can't without warm cream. Okay, so we're almost there. Okay, so almost finished the whipping. Be careful not to over whip. We want it firm so it holds the shape, but we cannot over whip it also. Okay. One more. Almost there. Okay. So once we have a stiff peak on our, we can now pipe it on top of our choux pastry. Inside this piping bag, I have a small petal tip, okay, for the rose petal. Okay, so this is the tip that I'm using. It's a small rose petal tip. And then now we can just finish off the eclair. Suggestion, okay.
If we have like a live session like this, say for all topics or any topic at a time, like a great speaking discussion session that might help to create hundreds of doubts, you know, like.
I can't say. Okay, I don't make the kind of rules. I just do. So I'm not the right person to ask about this. One, I'm sorry. And two, the one thing I can tell you, I don't mind answering any questions you have. You say go on the Facebook, but the only thing that's going to clear your doubt is you make it yourself. Really, it's the hard way to learn is practice. So I have nothing against these kind of answered questions or whatever. It's fine, but sometimes you're just going to have to step in and just do. And especially bread making, the only way to do it is to make up. But as far as that question goes, I'm not the right person to ask. Okay. So I'm going to do these one at a time. So now we're just going to come and type our chantilly on top. Then we have the feather that we made earlier.
Chef, how to store filled eclairs and unfilled eclairs, and what was the shelf life?
Filled eclairs, you don't store. You sell them same day if you want them to be nice, otherwise they'll be really soggy. A lot of places they fill them and sell them later, but it's not a very nice eclair. Unfilled, you keep them in the freezer and then just reheat so they dry out a little bit, and then freeze them back. So you reheat so they dry out a little bit and let them kind of cool down a little bit, and then you can fill. I don't suggest storing filled eclairs. You best serve the same day.
So if you bake the choux pastry, say in the morning, and want to serve in the evening, should we cling wrap and keep in the chiller? Standard advice.
No, just leave it room temperature is fine. If your room temperature is very humid and you feel they get soggy, just heat them up a little bit and let them cool down before the filling. For me, if I'm doing a business and I want something to stay long, I only make products that stay long. If I can't feasibly make the nice product and do it fresh, then I just won't sell it, in my personal opinion. For me, if I can't serve it very well for some reason, like time constraints or storage or the manpower, then I just won't sell that product. I won't put out something when I'm trying to sell or serve that's not fresh. That's just my personal philosophy. That's how I do business. So if I was gonna do these eclairs, maybe I would have a display cabinet, refrigerator display cabinet that have a few of these eclairs just there, but that's not the ones I'm gonna sell. Somebody orders, they just have to wait a second for somebody to kind of fill and then do fresh. So, and the other thing, guys, is I get a lot of questions on shelf life in general. I'm a teacher, I don't sell product. So maybe you can keep these cookies for a month, but I don't know, some cookie recipe or whatever you guys are asking me. I suggest you kind of test out yourself. And if you're happy with it, then your customer happy with it, you can sell it. Even when I worked in hotels and I did, you know, maybe 1,000 croissants in a day or 500 cheesecakes, I still found a way to make everything fresh. And it's just my own personal philosophy. Okay. Hold on one second. And then finally, if you want to see, this is the lavender flower I used. Or 4? Not a lot, just a few tiny pieces. I mean, because you can eat the raw lavender, but it's not that nice, so you don't want to just dump it on there. Okay. Okay, everyone. So that's it. That's our blueberry lavender eclair. I know everyone's probably going to ask me to cut one open. I mean, I'm assuming you can guess what it's going to look like because there's not that many components inside. But I cut, and we can see. So, should look like this. You have your eclair, then the blueberry jam, and then your chantilly on top. Any last questions before I go?
Yeah. After type out the eclair, it came a bit flattened. Is it normal or
your choux pastry is too wet. It's too liquid. You didn't cook the roux enough, or you misscaled the egg. All right. So in that case, since we're finished, thank you guys for tuning in. For those who are in Malaysia or somewhere who's celebrating Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year, Gong Xi Fa Chai, Happy New Year. If you're in Korea, say hey bonk mani paduseo. And I hope you guys all have a good New Year. And for those of you who are not, I hope you guys just have a good day. So until the next time I see you guys, thank you very much. And that's all.